1974. The news travels around the world in no time. While digging a well not far from a 2,200-year-old mausoleum, Chinese peasants uncover the most amazing ancient treasure trove since Tutankhamun. 1,600 meters from the tumulus, digging revealed human-sized statues. It is the army of the first emperor, Shi Huangdi, a megalomaniac and fearsome tyrant whose name is forever associated with the unification of ancient China. Shi Huangdi was the worthy heir to a long line of warriors. During 3 centuries of raids and ruthless battles, the Qin had overcome all their adversaries. To find out who the Qin were, we have to go back in time to the very roots of the empire. Their history is the tale of a formidable ascension of a people of nomads for a long time regarded as barbaric, but whose destiny would make them empire builders.
To grasp the power of a nation, we often have to explore its history. China is no exception, and has no end of fascinating secrets to reveal. For the first time, the Middle Kingdom is opening its doors for a journey back to the very roots of Chinese civilization. A journey through 2,000 years of antiquity, beyond legend, to the discovery of great dynasties, of incomparable works of art, and of flourishing civilizations that nevertheless died out and disappeared. A journey to the heart of an unknown and secretive China, a land of extraordinary colors, heir to a multitude of cultural influences. An odyssey to the sources of a great power born in antiquity.
Since the first discoveries in 1974, things have changed at Shi Huangdi's mausoleum. The authorities have covered the site to protect the relics and to receive visitors. Every year, 5 million tourists come from around the world to gaze upon the emperor's army set in stone for eternity. The extraordinary realism of the reproductions and the attention to detail never fail to impress the visitors, stunned by the incredible variety of faces and hairdos. All the statues are 1.80 meters high, but no 2 are alike. Each has its own characteristics. Chubby or skinny, with a beard or without, each soldier has his own personality and expresses his own character. The diversity also reflects the various geographic origins of the combatants. The emperor had succeeded in assimilating the peoples he conquered. His army symbolizes a country's first unification. It's a complex and delicate task for the archaeologists. The warriors have to be freed from a coating of clay hardened over time, piece them together when they're broken, and enable them to stand up and form ranks. The archaeologists, above all, tried to preserve the colors if they have lasted. For another major surprise is that all the statues were painted. The finest pieces are preserved in secure rooms. Scientists work on safeguarding the colors that have resisted the centuries. Analysis shows that certain colors were used in great quantities, representing a considerable investment.
It's a white pigment obtained from burnt animal bones. At the time, only someone with great power like Shi Huangdi had access to such a multitude of pigments.
Thanks to data provided by archaeology and the talent of graphic artists, the scientists have restored the terracotta army to their original colors. Artists in ancient China used 5 colors: white, black, red, blue, and yellow. They came from different regions and reflected a great diversity of environments and climates. Some scientists believe the use of these pigments showed that Shi Huangdi dominated a vast territory where he could freely exploit every resource. But how did Shi Huangdi come to control all of eastern China? His people, the Qin, underwent an incredible and unpredictable transformation. The civilized peoples, like the Zhou, who occupied the middle Yellow River Valley, regarded the surrounding tribes as barbarians, giving nicknames to the foreigners to be found to the north, south, east, and west of them. And it was to the west, beyond the boundaries of the civilized kingdoms, that lay the lands of the Qin. Even though they were regarded as savages, the Qin maintained relations with their powerful neighbors.
In any case, the Qin came from the west, that's for sure. Originally from the regions that were outside what we can regard as the Chinese world at the time of the Shang and the Zhou. We also know that the Qin were a group that had at one time been close to the Zhou royal family, because the Zhou royal family had actually entrusted one of the Qin family chiefs with the task of raising his horses.
In an isolated valley in the Gansu province is a village by the name of Qintingsun. It is said to be the original home of the Qin. It's a small town of 1,200 souls, 500 kilometers to the west of the Central Plains, where the first dynasties prospered, the Xia, Shang, and Zhou. The inhabitants today live from animal husbandry and corn farming. One old story about Shi Huangdi's genealogy has been passed down through the generations.
One day, a very old man told me that the ancestors of the first emperor bred horses here. It's a story that's been handed down by word of mouth for at least 1,000 years.
The historical chronicles written by Sima Qian in the 1st century BC confirm the legend.
A very long time ago, a man called Fei Tzu became famous for his passion for horses. His dedication was such that he became the best breeder in the region. One day, one of the inhabitants of his village talked to the king about his abilities. The king immediately summoned him to offer him a position. "Will you breed horses for me?" Fei Tzu applied himself to the task so well that the number of horses increased considerably. The king was very satisfied with his services, and so gave him the lands known by the name of Qin.
Twice a week, a big horse market is held near the village of Qingtingsun. The region is still known for its bloodstock. Buyers and sellers alike flock here as soon as the sun rises. Negotiations are tough, but in just a few hours, whole strings of horses have changed hands. The animals here are hardy, as the land they graze on is rich in minerals.
We have very lush grass here, and salt and water. It's thanks to that the Qin prospered. Their soldiers were powerful and their horses were robust. This explains why they were able to unify China.
The Qin were originally a nomadic tribe. But as they were excellent horse breeders, and horses were indispensable in times of war, they were no doubt able to become more powerful. The Qin warriors were feared by all their enemies. They adopted certain techniques from some of their neighbors, as revealed by the latest archaeological discoveries. The Gansu Province Archaeology Institute recently opened up a tomb and made an extraordinary discovery. The barbarians proved to be more refined than was expected. It's the first time these finds have been filmed. This battle chariot was decoratively covered in precious metals. The archaeologists were surprised to find silhouettes of wild animals. Wild sheep and tigers sculpted from sheets of gold and silver. The project leader has reconstructed the chariot using CGI.
The peoples of the West were regarded as barbarians. The inhabitants of the Central Plains, like the Zhou, looked down on them. But the results of these digs forces us to re-examine this point of view. The Qin that the historical texts treat with such disdain, in fact possessed a culture comparable to that of the states in the Central Plains.
不亚于朱熹。
In 770 BC, the kingdom of the Zhou was weakened. Fighting among their vassals was becoming widespread. Everyone wanted more land and power. It was the beginning of almost 500 years of war. The region dominated by the Zhou was divided up into rival states. Alliances were made and broken. In 450 BC, the Warring States period began. 7 major states emerged and finally freed themselves from the Zhou's control. Among them was the Qin. The Qin initially tried to take advantage of the situation, but their offensives to seize neighboring states were unsuccessful. Every attack was repelled. But the Qin grew stronger from the constant battles, as this period in Chinese antiquity was not only an endless bloodbath, as historian Roman Graziani explains.
La période des royaumes combattants est un âge d'or.
The Warring States period is a golden age and an iron age. It's an iron age in the sense that war and the militarization of society were the key to progress, and an accelerator which would lead the rival states to set up very effective institutions, mass production systems to make progress in weapons techniques, for siege warfare and campaigns that involved hundreds of thousands of soldiers. The intelligentsia at the time were all working on ways to achieve dominance on a philosophical or an ideological level. It was a time when major military techniques were developed and perfected, and the art of espionage too, of disinformation and diplomacy. It was the reality of war and the vital necessity for each state to protect itself that explains this laboratory of ideas, which would in part be embodied by the great institutional reforms that the kingdoms underwent at the time.
The Qin would become dominant thanks to the work of a great administrator, Shang Yang. A former advisor in the state of Wei, he began working with the Qin in 361 BC. He introduced judicial, administrative, and fiscal reforms. He drew up laws, inscribed on bamboo tablets, which affected every aspect of daily life. A system that enabled the Qin to keep a tight control of the people. Shang Yang organized the state around a single essential activity: war.
Shang Yang procède à la fusion des
Shang Yang brought about a fusion between civil and military institutions. The basic citizen was a peasant soldier who worked in brigades with his companions, and they were also companions in arms when they fought under Qin colors. They cut down the corn in the fields, and they cut down their enemies according to the same logic. Society itself was entirely subjected to this process of discipline, control and surveillance, which was based more on martial law than on civil institutions.
The chronicles recount how Shang Yang introduced a very simple system for promotion: a head for a rank. For each enemy head, the Qin soldiers climbed another rung in the army's pyramidal hierarchy. One recently discovered document seems to confirm the existence of this system. A few characters on a wooden tablet about 20 centimeters long. A letter from two soldiers to their mother more than 2,000 years ago.
The second month, the day of Xinxi. Heifu and I send you our most humble greetings and ask Zhong, is our mother well? As for us, we're not doing too badly. Heifu and the others fought for a long time to capture the city of Huiyan, which had rebelled. No one knows how many were wounded. When you receive this letter, please reply to tell us if news of our promotion has reached the village.
The letter implies a merit system for promotion. Among the Qin, war seems to have been a springboard for social advancement.
The ultimate yardstick for bonuses and rewards to attain a higher grade of nobility within the 20 grades that existed was the cut-off head of an enemy. And every measure and degree of merit was calculated in reference to this decapitated head. Forms of pressure and punishment that were applied also took the battlefield as the absolute reference, as if the battlefield were a sort of microcosm, which inspired the behavior and sanctions and rewards in a so-called civil society.
Thanks to Shangyang, the Qin army was considerably reinforced during the Warring States period. It had heavy and light infantry regiments, cavalry, and an impressive fleet of battle chariots. The Terracotta Army includes 100 chariots whose wooden chassis have rotted over the centuries, but 2 have survived intact. They are bronze replicas. Their discovery has enabled archaeologists to understand every detail of this type of vehicle. The bridles, harnesses, and traction systems. Everything is here, 2,000 years later. Excavation work at Qin Shi Huangdi's mausoleum has never really stopped since the mid-70s. 7,000 terracotta warriors and 600 horses have been unearthed. The slightest piece of the three-dimensional puzzle is painstakingly restored. Alongside the troops, archaeologists discovered a veritable armory. They were expecting to find a few spears and arrowheads, but uncovered a much vaster arsenal. Among the weaponry, they found some exceptional armor. No one had seen its like before. It was made of stone.
This piece of armor used for a hip is very finely sculpted. It was designed to marry the curves of a human body. Today, using our own technology, it would take more than 100 days to make armor like this. According to the size of the site, we estimate there are around 100 full sets of armor. Imagine the work that must have entailed to make it, and how hard it would have been for the workers.
There are 87 sets of armor. Each one contains 612 pieces of polished slate, cut to fit precisely one against the other. Of course, no soldiers at the time wore stone armor. The emperor's soldiers were clothed in iron and leather, but the king wanted to be certain that this arsenal would resist the ravages of time and climatic conditions. Only a terracotta army could wear these ceremonial costumes. of kneeling soldiers have aroused the archaeologists' curiosity. What could they have held in their hands? The weapon has disappeared, stolen by pillagers or eaten away by the humidity. But one enigmatic piece of bronze has resisted the effects of time. It looks like a firing pin or a trigger, but firearms were unknown at the time. To understand its function, scientists have traveled far, to the far-flung mountains of Yunnan. It's a 3-hour walk along a steep, winding path to reach the village on the mountainside. It's in this region that the New people live, one of the 56 ethnic groups recognized by the People's Republic. The weapon they use for hunting has been known since antiquity.
Do you have one? Of course I have one.
It's a projectile shooting weapon similar to a crossbow.
We use it for killing birds and bigger animals. The quiver is made from bear fur. A long time ago, it wasn't only used for hunting. The weapon was also used to kill people in battle. For the birds, we use this arrow. For bigger animals, we use this one. We choose the arrow depending on the situation.
The bow is made of oak. The trigger is cowbone. The men from the village regularly organize shooting contests. The weapon is easy to use. The string is tightened by a rigid piece similar to the one found during excavations. It's a nut, which holds the string and releases it at the moment of firing. The shooter doesn't have to make a physical effort when he aims, and so gains in accuracy. Professor Takashi Kitamura is an expert on ancient Chinese weapons. He is reconstructing the crossbow used by Shi Huangdi's soldiers. The Qin had improved the system by making a nut and trigger mechanism from bronze. Originally, the piece had been carved from an animal bone and was relatively fragile. This technological advance allowed the string to be drawn much tighter, and the weapon became more powerful.
The arrow is placed in the nut like this. Then the string is tightened against the nut. When the crossbow is ready, you just have to pull the trigger to release the string.
The Qin's weapon was very large. It was so powerful that it could pierce armor from a distance of several hundred meters, if the cord could be tightened.
Japan is known for having adopted and adapted certain technologies, but China has been doing this since antiquity. The Chinese borrowed various techniques from ethnic minorities and then considerably improved them.
The kneeling warriors were therefore elite troops, feared by every other army at the time. Crossbowmen. Qin's records of a grand historian describe the Qin's rise to power. After the 4th century BC, they overcame the rulers of the regions closest to their own territory. They conquered 12 states and founded a vast kingdom to the west of the Yellow River. The Qin leaders sent administrators to the annexed kingdoms to impose their laws. But it was an arduous task, as the conquered populations had cultures far removed from their new masters. In certain regions, there was revolt and rebellion. In 340 BC, the Qin reached the heart of the Central Plains and took over the state of Wei. In 316, they swept to the south, towards the banks of the Yangtze, and seized control of one of the richest agricultural regions, centered on what is today the Sichuan province, the land of the Ba Shu people. The people in this region were unlike the cultures along the Yellow River, with very different traditions and customs, including burial rituals for their leaders. In 2006, a mechanical digger hit a wooden structure buried deep underground. Archaeologists came running to free the monument from the tons of mud that had preserved it. It looked like a tree trunk. All sorts of hypotheses were put forward until a crane opened up the astonishing sarcophagus. It was the tomb of an important figure. The burial method and the objects accompanying the deceased are typical of the region. Certain bronze pieces bear inscriptions that still have not been deciphered. This is the Ba Shu sarcophagus. The Qin discovered sedentary populations. The Ba Shu were farmers and woodworkers. They buried their dead in boat-shaped coffins. Our ancestors believed in a tradition whereby the dead reached the afterlife in a boat. As this area is very close to the river, boats were an important element in the inhabitants' lives, as they were a common means of transport. So when people died, it was normal for them to be sent to the next world in a boat. Despite the resistance they met, the Qin continued to advance to the east and the south. In 277 BC, their armies swept over the southeast. They invaded another state, until then independent, Chu. Here, too, the Qin administrators had a hard time imposing their laws. The Chu had developed a culture that was very distinct from those born along the banks of the Yellow River. They had notably adopted certain customs from peoples they had conquered, such as shamanism, a practice that still lives on in certain villages in the modern-day Hubei province. The motifs and patterns drawn on the sarcophagus of the Marquis Yi of Tsu, a nobleman who died around 433 BC, show that the Chu were concerned with protecting the souls of their dead. Horned man-bird figures and guards armed with spears are present to repel evil spirits. They are protective divinities. The Qin would find a way to resolve the cultural differences. They presented themselves as worthy heirs to the Zhou and adopted a number of their codes and customs.
Les souverains Qin utilisaient dans leur...
The Qin sovereigns used a certain number of words and expressions in their inscriptions that had previously been used by Zhou sovereigns.
Donc, dès cette époque, on a
So at that time, the Qin were determined to see themselves as continuing that Zhou culture, the culture of the Middle Yellow River Valley.
Cours moyen du fleuve Jaune.
In 238 BC, a new Qin sovereign came to the throne. His name, Yang Jing, the future Shi Huangdi. The old Zhou dynasty had by now disappeared. Yang Jing would make his predecessors' dreams of domination come true through the unification of every state. In 237 BC, Yang Jing waged outright war. He beat all his adversaries one by one. By 221, his armies had invaded every rival kingdom. Yang Jing assumed the title of Shi Huangdi, the first emperor. He had achieved the dream of countless Chinese rulers.
Le premier empereur, en un sens...
The first emperor, in a sense, realized the messianic hopes of several generations of thinkers who had wanted to bring an end to the diversity and plurality that was a constant source of conflict and war. Those who aspired to peace were convinced that peace would only come through the unification of the whole territory.
Là-dessus, tous les penseurs...
All the thinkers categorically agreed on that, and that unification would be brought about by the actions of one man, of the unique man, the great man, who would appear and put an end to centuries of discord.
à des siècles de discorde.
The emperor made laws, unified weight and measuring systems, revised writing, and created income tax. Along the northern borders, hundreds of thousands of workers began a gigantic task, building a great wall 2,400 kilometers long to link existing fortifications and drive back hordes of invading barbaric horsemen. China became exclusive, the country at the center of the New World, Zhongguo, the Middle Kingdom. For a long time, a legend circulated over the Quanzhong plain. Shi Huangdi, the great prince, was said to have built a giant dam. Professor Ching has walked every inch of the plain. He has retraced the course of the river and of time.
It's here. You can see, right here. The structure cuts across the riverbed from one side to the other. And here's the course of the river.
Professor Ching has found levees apparently man-made. The material used to build the mounds was packed earth, and he has no doubt they are 2,000 years old and part of an enormous dam.
Look over there. You can see part of what's left of the dike. After 2,200 years, the dike has crumbled away and that's all that remains. But at the time it was built, the dike continued in that direction, crossed the river, passed directly where we are now, and continued on to the other side.
到达这个小山的下边。
In other words, this dike stopped the flow of the river and formed an enormous
大
dam.
坝全长是2650。
And so Shi Huangdi tamed the rivers and built canals. The construction of this dam must have mobilized thousands of workers. The whole thing stretched over 2.5 kilometers and was several tens of meters high. Behind the packed earth levee, a vast lake provided water for irrigating the whole plain. The first emperor spent part of his reign traveling around his vast kingdom, inspecting work in progress. He set up a civil administration which became a local relay for implementing his decisions, and it would become a vital tool for every successive imperial dynasty. In 221 BC, after achieving unification, the emperor chose his capital. It would be Xiangyang, ideally located on the banks of the Wei River, at the center of a road network serving the whole empire at the end of the famous Silk Road. A few kilometers away, the town of Xi'an continued to be an imperial capital under the Han and Tang dynasties. The old town is surrounded by ramparts some 13 kilometers long, built in the 14th century on the orders of Ming emperors. The influence of China's western regions can be felt in the city, which still appears like a meeting point between Central Asia and the Far East. Part of the population is Muslim. Shi Huangdi didn't choose the site by chance. Its position corresponded to his desire to be at the center of the universe, an obsession which was quite clearly embodied on the ground. It is in the outskirts of the modern city of Xi'an that archaeologists have located Shi Huangdi's palace. The fortunate discovery of 5,000 clay seals on a construction site provided the solution to a mystery that had endured for over 2,000 years. Some of the seals suggest that large quantities of salt and gold had been delivered to the site. The archaeologists suppose that it must have been a very important place. Sima-Qian's chronicles speak of a polar temple. Devoted to a celestial cult, the building is thought to have symbolized the Northern Star. Have the scientists found where the temple was built? Professor Tsuruma from Gakushuin University believes this is the case. He first of all located where the seals were discovered on a satellite image. It was in the center of the imperial capital's official buildings. The Japanese scientists are convinced this is the site of the solar temple Sima-Qian mentions in his chronicles. During Chinese antiquity, the polar star, called Di, or Emperor, was worshipped as a divinity, presiding over the destiny of mortals. Qin Shi Huangdi sought to combine his authority with the stars.
He wanted to place his capital at the center of the world. He was in the process of taking control of a gigantic and diversified region. He couldn't accomplish this only by using force, so he also relied on the celestial authorities.
After unification, Shi Huangdi gave up the title of Wang, or king, and took that of Huangdi, or emperor. He even proclaimed himself Shi Huangdi, the first emperor. The title Huangdi comes from the association of the word Huang, which means shining, and the term Di for the North Star. But the Polar Temple is not the only building to refer to the heavens. Professor Tsuruma believes the whole capital was built according to a particular plan, inspired by the heavenly vault.
They're connected from the Shenyang Palace to the Polar Palace and the Upang Palace, although we're not 100% sure.
The location illustrated on the satellite photo has to be superimposed over the position of the stars. But after 2,200 years, the skyscape has changed. The stars have changed place. Astronomers from Japan's National Observatory are able to remodel the sky as the Chinese would have seen it in 221 BC. At the time, the pole star was situated at the end of the Little Bear constellation. Today, it's on the other side.
This is the pole star, exactly here. The Milky Way corresponds to the River Wei.
A plan of the capital corresponds perfectly to the positions of the stars in the month of October, the beginning of the year for the Qin. The Tianyang Palace is to the north of the River Wei. It corresponds to the Pegasus constellation. In Chinese, the rough square of Pegasus is called Yingqi, which means palace. The ruins of the bridge spanning the river were uncovered in the summer of 2012. The site follows the path of Cassiopeia. The Chinese call this constellation Gedao, the bridge which crosses the Milky Way. The Polar Temple is at the exact point occupied by the North Star at that time.
That looks fine. It fits very well like that.
The first emperor apparently laid out the monuments in his capital according to the astronomical observations made at the time. The watercourse that crosses the city, the River Wei, symbolizes the Milky Way. Palaces and monuments were built according to the positions of the main constellations. The Polar Temple was the terrestrial counterpart of the star that was worshipped there. But ancient texts say the edifice was also built to honor the emperor. The star and the man were assimilated. In this way, the first emperor imposed his predominance and his role at the center of the universe.
He wanted to become the center of the universe himself by occupying a position as central as the North Star in the skies. That's why he projected the celestial world on the ground, implying that the world he ruled over was identical to the heavenly world. I think he tried to build a nation that revolved entirely around his own person.
Qin Shi Huang died in 210 BC. His dynasty survived for only a few more years before being supplanted by the Han Dynasty. But his mausoleum lives on, like the last symbol of a glory the emperor wanted to be eternal. This embodiment of his megalomania should not overshadow the extensive administrative progress the first emperor achieved. Most of his reforms were taken up by his successors. In unifying the country, Shi Huangdi established political bases that would last more than 20 centuries. He was the founding father of the Middle Kingdom, Zhongguo, the civilized land. His dynasty, the Qin, inspired the Western name for the country, China. The modern-day Chinese find their roots in this story. Every year, hundreds of thousands of them make the pilgrimage to the summit of Mount Tai, the most venerable of the 5 great mountains. It was here that the emperors paid homage to the heavens. It was also here that Qin Shi Huang had proclaimed the unity of his empire, which, despite the country's cultural differences, constitutes the age-old heritage of the People's Republic of China.